Tēnā koutou katoa, he kara, he monti, kaurua koutou tahi ko tō rahi, nāna tēnei rōpu I whakatau, me whakautu e ahau e nā mihi kia koutou I roto I tō tātou reo Māori. Nā reira tēnā no koutou. Her worship, the Mayor, I understand the High Commissioner from Australia is here. Greetings. All assembled personalities, grandees, investors, leaders from the infrastructure community, New Zealand, Trans-Tasman, and international visitors, greetings. Last year, I arrived wearing a high-vis vest and my Zorro hat. You may be wondering how come the colourful infrastructure minister is dressed quite conservatively in the colours of the National Party, blue. Do not read too much into that about the future. Yesterday I was at the coronation meeting held annually to celebrate the coronation of the Māori King, King Tuheitia. And as you might imagine, from the orator's bench, I spoke on behalf of our government, representing our Prime Minister in our Māori language. I endeavoured to generate a bit of humour, and then when I sat down, it was the time for the Prime Minister to speak under the eaves of the famous carved meeting house at Tūranga Waiwai, Ngārua Wāhia, just north of Hamilton. Our Prime Minister regards Waikato as her Tūranga Waiwai, part of kith and kin. And she said the following. She borrowed the style that Māori people introduced themselves in New Zealand, and she said, Te Aroha is my mountain, also the name of her little baby. Waiho is my river, a river that flows via the Hauraki Plains. Then she finished off and said, Waikato is my Tūranga Waiwai, it's where I regard my home, but my greatest risk is Shane Jones. Not to be mistaken with Alan Jones. So upon hearing the Prime Minister say that to about 1,000 Māoris, I thought I'd turn up in a rather conservative garb. Last year, I, on behalf of Cabinet, announced that we would create an independent infrastructure entity. I'm here today to talk about that entity, and later in my speech I'm going to invite the people who will sit upon that entity, led by a very senior New Zealander, Mr. Bollard. But before I get to that point, please indulge me. I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and my responses to those challenges. We have the legislation wending its way through Parliament at the moment, which will create the powers and functions, and there has been a wee bit of niggle as to whether or not this central independent entity should have the ability to secure information on a regular basis from local government. That problem has been dealt to my satisfaction. But beyond that, Paul, on behalf of ANZ, has talked about the regions. And what I say now, I want to put in the backdrop of what our Governor of the Reserve Bank said in the last week or so. I was struck by his frankness. I only hope it's not impulsiveness, but I never thought as a senior politician that I would ever hear a Reserve Governor talk about sub-zero interest rates. It is something that, as a pro-industry, pro-market sort of guy, never thought I'd hear it. But what I was particularly motivated to talk about is his challenge to the ministers, and in a sense my good self, along with Grant Robertson, you have to help do the heavy lifting if the economy requires some robust injections. The challenge that I find as the infrastructure minister is that we probably in the future need to keep projects on the shelf and come up with better ways at bringing them to market, bringing them into a fruition at a lot quicker pace than is currently the case. And that in a sense is your challenge as well, which is why I know you'll back me, because that is now a key challenge for the people that comprise our independent commission. Politics will ebb and flow. We will always bring with us projects you might dismiss as pet projects. We as politicians believe we've tested them through the electoral process. We bring them to the attention and into the heart of government. But all of those projects need to be put through the mincer. Whether it's my ambition to see the relocation of more economic activity at the port in Marsden Point out of Auckland into Whangarei, whether it's the ambition agreed to in the supply and confidence agreement between Labour and the Greens, not in the New Zealand First Coalition agreement, that we would embark upon light rail. All of these things need to be put through a mincer, and that mincer is a source of frustration for your average politician, I have to say, but I accept that if we are to be credible, attracting international capital, having a better long-term plan, better utilisation of our own financial capital, our own human capital, and a far more sophisticated approach as to how we use our natural capital, then that is the new threshold and the new standard. The projects in the regions, I have learnt to my cost as the regional minister, where pūtea funding goes into our sister organisations, whether it be Kiwi Rail, whether it be Simon Allen's infrastructure entity, whether it be NZTA, without drive, without consistent checking up, things drift. So there will be considerable activity next year with the $137 million that I have allocated on behalf of my fellow ministers to the roads in the Tairāwhiti. We will be building, we will be delivering the digital connectivity of nigh on $50 million into the West Coast. We will continue to chew through the $50 million in terms of bringing a new cadre of infrastructure employees into the world of light and out of the twilight zone where their potential is squandered and they cost you and I as Kiwi taxpayers too much money because we have not brought them into the workforce. We have reached, I think, quite a sweet spot with Minister Hipkins in relation to vocational training. Whilst significant changes are on the way for our polytechs, there is at least 2 or 3 years for the leaders of industry, the ITOs representing industry training ambitions, to work out a better, more effective and more productive system. New Zealand First particularly focused on ensuring that there was not too much destabilisation in respect of industry training. Let me talk a little bit about Kiwi Rail. Obviously, our party campaigned successfully along with other elements that comprise the coalition government. So when one adds up how much is going in from core Crown funding and the provincial growth funding, by the end of 2 years, it's not going to be far shy of $1.5 billion for Kiwi Rail. But the test for me as the infrastructure minister is how efficient, how flexible, how sophisticated will the procurement system be? We want action. Business as usual will not cut it. So in that sense, I'm also expecting a better quality of outcome in relation to procurement processes, and looking forward to Dr. Alan Bollard and his colleagues helping the Crown in that regard. On the question of further investment, it is my view that the system that has been regarded as untouchable orthodoxy in terms of pay-as-you-go for our roading needs to be revised. Recently we had Sir Brian Roche, who we are very happy to see now in charge of NZTA. He has agreed to bring back to us, with the transport officials, options for the politicians to look at and to make decisions about. If there is a need to change the way within which we have historically funded our roading infrastructure, my call to Brian Roche has been, bring the options to the politicians. We'll either say yes or we'll say no. The longer it whirls around in a fog of business, of bureaucracy, of media speculation, the longer it's going to take for us to grapple and defeat the monster of our infrastructure deficit. We are waiting to hear, both Mr. Twyford and my good self, about when can we start the Penlink project. I have been stung by my regional mayors saying, okay, safety is good, that's beyond cavil, but where are the projects? Show me on a bit of paper. So that is a major focus of myself at the moment, isolating and conveying to the doubting Thomases that we don't have enough actual economic activity coming through. But that, in my view, folks, speaks to the underlying challenges. How do we better arrive at a blend of capital or capital equations that enable us as the politicians who genuinely want to deliver at a faster pace on infrastructure outcomes? The next couple of months, Wayne Brown will be serving up his report pertaining to the Upper North Island Port Study. We will also be receiving reports as to what are the options to begin the relocation of current activity associated with the Navy up to Marsden Point. And a place that we have agreed to start at is the relocation potentially of a dry dock facility. On the question of Te Waihanga, the Commission, it is my pleasure to formally announce the following names. They realise Rotorua is the Maori cultural performing capital of New Zealand. They realise I am a Māori and I'm bilingual, so I'm told they've been practicing Pō Kare Kare Ana all night. At that point, Alan Bollard considered handing in his letter of acceptance. Can I invite up, please, so you know exactly who your proxies are on our new Independent Infrastructure Commission. Dr. Alan Bollard is the chair. Ms. Sue Tyndall, a distinguished CFO. Ravine, highly supported by huge numbers of Auckland MPs, currently undertaking the leadership of Watercare's project. Sarah Sinclair, who is currently playing a role in terms of shepherding various options to the government in relation to light rail. David Cochrane, who knows more than any other New Zealander about the regulatory frameworks, the historic institutional legislative frameworks of infrastructure. And Stephen Selwood, who should be known as a famous member of this body because when Lyndon Johnson was the the President, I think President 36 from Texas. He's not remembered for the war on poverty. He's not remembered for, I think it was called the Great Society. Some of us may recall his role in protracting the Vietnam War. He's remembered when he described Hoover running the FBI, better to have him in the tent projecting outwards rather than outside of the tent wetting the inside. So can you please come up here? And the originating CEO, Mr. John Grayson, please come up as well. Folks, please make yourselves known to these individuals. They will really hit their straps once we have passed the legislation. But these individuals, which is a rare thing, are agreed to by my friends, frenemies, enemies on the other side of the House, by my colleagues from the Green Party, by my colleagues from Labour, and I want us to homai te paki paki, an enthusiastic round of applause for the new members of Waihanga, our Independent Infrastructure Commission. The first meeting that I will participate in is getting the chair of NZTA in the room, Greg Miller from Kiwi Rail in the room, with Mr. Bollard. We will have a meal. You will put it on your credit card because I've had such a troubled history in that regard. Thank you very much.